On November 29, 1970, two hikers in the mountains outside Bergen, Norway, made a discovery. A woman, lying in a remote valley called Isdalen, the Ice Valley. Her body was badly burned. Around her were the remnants of her belongings, burned with her. She had been dead for several days. When investigators examined what remained of her clothing, every single label had been cut out, deliberately, before she died. Her fingerprints had been removed. Her teeth showed signs of extensive dental work, but no dentist in Norway could identify her records. Nobody reported her missing. Nobody came forward to identify her. Over 50 years later, investigators still do not know her name. The woman found in Isdalen is known only as the Isdal Woman, and her case remains one of the most baffling, unsolved mysteries in European history. This is Unresolved. Isdalen, the Ice Valley, is a remote, steeply forested valley in the mountains outside Bergen, Norway. It is not the kind of place people stumble across by accident. It requires a deliberate hike through difficult terrain. And yet, on November 29, 1970, a father hiking with his two young daughters found a woman's body there. She was lying among rocks in a partial clearing. Around her were burned items, a passport holder, some personal effects, remnants of clothing. Her body showed signs of severe burning, but this alone had not killed her. The autopsy revealed something more disturbing. She had ingested a massive overdose of sleeping pills, 50 times the normal dose, and there were bruises on her body consistent with a physical struggle. The official verdict was suicide, but investigators who have studied this case for decades are deeply skeptical. 50 times the lethal dose of sleeping pills. And then her body was set on fire, in a remote valley that requires deliberate effort to reach, with every identifying feature removed before her death. Does that sound like suicide to you? Norwegian police launched an immediate investigation. What they found painted a picture of a woman who had gone to extraordinary lengths to remain invisible. In the weeks before her death, she had stayed at multiple hotels across Norway, always under different names, always paying in cash. Hotel staff remembered her as well-dressed, composed, and notably private. She spoke multiple languages fluently: Norwegian, German, French, English, and possibly others. Nobody could determine where she was originally from. At a train station in Bergen, investigators found two suitcases she had left in a locker. Inside, more clothing with every label removed, glasses with the prescription ground down, making them impossible to trace to an optician. A collection of items that revealed nothing about who she was or where she came from. And then there were the codes. In one of the suitcases, investigators found a notebook. Inside the notebook were sequences of letters and numbers that appeared to be coded. One sequence, when eventually decoded, turned out to be a list of dates, locations, and what appeared to be travel itineraries, spanning multiple countries across Europe. Whoever this woman was, she had been moving constantly, deliberately, under multiple identities. For what purpose? Nobody could determine. Over the decades, investigators have worked to establish even the most basic facts about this woman. Physical description: approximately 30 years old, around 5 feet 5 inches tall, dark hair, well-built, described by hotel staff as attractive and elegantly dressed. Dental work: extensive, high-quality dental work that suggested she came from a country with advanced dentistry, possibly Central or Eastern Europe, or possibly South America. In 2016, the Norwegian broadcaster NRK collaborated with international investigators to reopen the case. New forensic analysis was conducted. Isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she had spent significant time in multiple European countries during her childhood and adolescence, possibly moving between countries regularly. DNA was extracted and entered into international databases. Facial reconstruction was completed from her skull, producing an image of what she likely looked like. Despite all of this, Despite 50 years of investigation and modern forensic technology, her identity has never been confirmed. Not a single person has ever come forward and said, "I know who she was." The details of this case point toward one explanation more than any other. The Isdal Woman was a spy. Consider what we know. She traveled constantly across Europe under multiple false identities, always paying cash, always removing identifying information from her belongings. She spoke multiple languages fluently, with no clearly identifiable accent that would place her in a specific country. She was found dead in a remote location with every identifying feature removed, either by herself or by someone else, in a manner that made positive identification nearly impossible. The coded notebook, the deliberate itineraries, the grinding down of her glasses prescription. These are not the behaviors of a tourist. These are the behaviors of someone who was trained to leave no trace, trained to operate undercover, trained to disappear. Norwegian intelligence services, when asked about the case, have consistently declined to comment. In 2016, it emerged that Norwegian police had classified portions of the original investigation file. Some of those files remain classified today. Why would the investigation into an apparent suicide be classified? What did Norwegian authorities know or suspect that they did not want made public? The Cold War was at its height in 1970. Bergen was a strategically significant NATO port. Foreign intelligence services, from both sides of the Iron Curtain, were active throughout Scandinavia during this period. The Isdal Woman may have been one of them. Hotel records allowed investigators to piece together the Isdal Woman's final weeks. She had arrived in Norway in early November 1970. She moved between cities, Bergen, Stavanger, Oslo, staying briefly at each location before moving on. Hotel staff who remembered her described a woman who seemed increasingly anxious in her final days, less composed than she had appeared initially. In Bergen, days before her death, a hotel worker recalled her standing at the window of her room for extended periods, watching the street below. Was she watching for someone? Was someone watching for her? On November 23rd, 6 days before her body was found, she checked out of her final hotel in Bergen. She collected her suitcases from the train station locker, and then she went to Isdalen. Whether she went alone, or whether someone took her there, remains unknown. The burning of her body destroyed crucial forensic evidence. The question of whether her death was suicide or murder may never be definitively answered. But the question that haunts this case more than any other is simpler than that. Who was she? She was approximately 30 years old. She had a childhood. She had a family somewhere. Someone, somewhere in the world, knew her real name. That person has never come forward, or perhaps they were never in a position to. 3 theories have dominated this case for 50 years. Theory 1. She was a spy, either working for a Western intelligence agency or for the Soviet bloc, who was either eliminated by her handlers or who took her own life to avoid capture or exposure. This theory is supported by her behavior, her skills, and the classified nature of portions of the police file. Theory 2. She was a criminal, possibly involved in smuggling or other organized crime that required the kind of constant movement and false identity management that her travel patterns suggest. Her death may have been ordered by those she worked with, or she may have been running from them. Theory 3. She was a deeply troubled individual who, for reasons of severe mental illness or personal trauma, had constructed an elaborate false existence, and ultimately ended her own life in a remote location, having removed identifying information in a final attempt to maintain the privacy she had protected throughout her life. I'm not going to tell you which theory to believe. What I will tell you is this. Somewhere in the world, there is a family that lost a daughter, a sister, a mother in November 1970. They may have spent 50 years not knowing what happened to her, not knowing where she was, not knowing if she was alive. If you recognize the facial reconstruction, if anything about this case seems familiar, Norwegian police still have an active tip line, because until she has a name, this case remains unresolved. The facial reconstruction is linked in the description. Look at it. Really look at it. Someone, somewhere, knows who she was. What do you think happened in Isdalen? Was she a spy? Was she running from something? Or is the truth something none of us have considered? Leave your theory below. Subscribe to Unresolved. New case every week. I'm Unresolved. And we're just getting started.